Everybody loves to talk about the sophomore breakout in fantasy football, but for these 11 wide receivers, is that something that's actually going to come true this season, or are we going to fall flat on our face and miss those expectations? That is exactly what we're talking about today as we go through 11 wide receivers who are entering their sophomore season and exactly what we can expect. And we're going to talk about these wide receivers in the order in which they were drafted. And who can forget Marvin Harrison Jr., Ty, supposed to be a generational prospect, a top 5 pick last year, standing at 6'3", 205 pounds. But let's be honest, as a rookie, it was a little disappointing, especially when you compare it to a couple of these guys who went after him. 62 receptions, 116 yards, 116 targets, 885 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Finishes a wide receiver 29 and half PPR formats. He is currently going on underdog. And Ty, you said you were surprised by this when you looked at it. Wide receiver 14, pick 27. Why is that surprising to you? Why are you like, I don't know about that?
Well, it just tells me that general consensus thinks that it's going to click this year, that it's all going to be figured out. And I think there is certainly the possibility that it can, but I don't want to say the wide receiver 14 is a guarantee that it's going to happen, but that's what you're asking for. And I'm not sure it's a guarantee necessarily. There needs to be a fix in this offense if we want to see that wide receiver 14, top 15, top 12, even wide receiver production. And on paper, the fix is relatively simple in my mind. We need to start moving this guy around the formation a little bit, along the line of scrimmage. Please. Like, where Marv struggled the most last year was with physicality at the catch point. So anything downfield that was tightly covered, and just traditional outside wide receiver roles. Like I said, going vertical or the curl routes, just because he's not the quickest, not the fastest guy out there. What he wins on is his route running ability, and his separation. That's where he wins. And for a guy like that to just be kind of pigeonholed to the outside, it kind of makes sense that we got the season that we got, because this dude, I don't want to say he needs catering to or that he needs the extra help, but with a talent like Marvin Harrison Jr., why wouldn't you want to try to move him around and use him to the best that you can? Like, put his skill set to best use. So again, while the fix may sound simple on paper, it's a matter of if the coordinator is going to make that change. And I don't know the coach personally. I don't think many people do, to be honest with you. So again, I can't answer that. That's one I'm going to be looking out for during training camp, from beat reporters, from press conferences, all that kind of stuff. But again, kind of how you let it off. Wide receiver 14 seems like we're just, again, on best ball formats, the general consensus is saying that it's going to happen. And I don't think it's just that outright to say that it's going to.
For sure. And I think clarifying that it's best ball, right? We do redraft on Sleeper, those ESPN, those rankings haven't fully come into form, right? They have them out, but people aren't drafting as consistently. So if you're looking for live drafts, underdog, quick plug, code fellas. All right, just throwing that out there. But clearly, Marvin Harrison going 5th overall last season, the front office believes in this guy. He has the talent. So the upside's definitely there. Mm-hmm. I think we saw what the floor was last year, right? Wide receiver 30, right? 900 yards, 60 receptions. I think that's the floor again. Like, I don't think it's going to be much lower this season. But I guess the question, what everyone's asking, Ty, is what is the ceiling? Can he be a top 5 wide receiver? Can he be a top 10 wide receiver? Is it top 15? Like, how high do you think this ceiling is with Marvin Harrison this season?
I don't think it's top 5, and I would actually go all the way to say it's not going to be top 10, because we need to just name those guys real quick. It's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua. Those guys are the top 5 and pretty established. Then you're looking at some guys that we're going to talk about later, Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr. Then you've got Nico Collins, Drake London, and A.J. Brown. That's your top 10. I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. gets into that top 10. I'll be completely honest. Then you start to look at guys like McConkey, JSN, Tyreek, T. Higgins, at least in redraft. That I'm going off of Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings for that top 15. I think there's a path for Marvin Harrison to kind of find that like 11 to 15 range, just because it seems like that top 10 is pretty solidified. Anything after that is anyone's guess at how that's going to work out. But I'm still hesitant to say that's going to be top 15 because, again, that change has to happen. He's not going to finish top 15 if he does the exact same thing and he does exactly what he was asked to do last year. It's just not going to happen.
So I do think he has top 10 upside. I think it's very difficult to get to, right? I think like you said, top 5 would be he makes just an insane jump, right? Like almost, I don't want to say unprecedented because obviously we know the talent, but just because like you said, that top 5 is tough. I mean, even the top 7 is tough when you add in, Nico Collins, Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas, Drake London. I mean, to be top 10, he's going to have to be cracking 90 receptions. He's going to have to crack 1,200 yards, 8 or 9 touchdowns, which is a pretty significant jump from where he was last year. I think he has the talent to do it. But again, if I had to place a bet right now, I probably put him between wide receiver 14 and wide receiver 18. That's where I would guess that he ends up on this next year. But obviously, like I said multiple times, we know he has the talent to make the jump. Next, we got a wide receiver who's already broken out. And I know what you're saying. If you're looking at the title on YouTube, on Spotify, why are we talking about this guy? He's already broke out. We understand, but we wanted to talk about all the wide receivers. So we'll keep this one short for you guys who think this is a little bit of cheating. Malik Nabers was fantastic last year on an awful New York Giants team. 170 targets. Outrageous. 109 receptions, 1,204 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 7, and he did all of that in 15 games. Dude missed 2 games last year, right? I mean, he could have been pushing 200 targets if he plays all 17 games, which is just pretty wild to think about. He is currently going as the wide receiver 6, 9th overall in best ball drafts. And you want to know what, Ty? I don't think that's too high. I don't think that's too high at all. If anything, we might look back at this and go, why was he not a top 3 wide receiver because of what we saw his rookie season? But is there any reason that we could see regression from Malik Nabers this year? Or is he kind of regression proof at this point?
So let me explain it like this. He's both. He can regress, but he may be regression proof because 170 targets is an outrageous amount for a rookie. In fact, it's the most that we've seen from a rookie. Like, it is absurd. So we could see a drop in targets. It's very possible. But I'm also kind of expecting that we're going to see a jump in yards and consequently the yards per reception go up as well because of improved quarterback play. Yeah. Regardless of what you think of Jackson Dart and Russell Wilson, I've said this before, it is miles better than Daniel Jones, than Tommy DeVito, than Drew Lock. Like, it is much, much better. And we've talked about Russ with the moon balls. Nabers is a vertical threat, and he can be the guy to be on the opposite end of those moon balls. Jackson Dart, again, in that Ole Miss offense, very vertical and very, very downfield. That Nabers can do that. So while he was 4th in deep targets last year, according to PFF, it was just a 24% catch rate. So a lot of those deep targets actually never really materialized into anything at all because they were not complete. Duh. But because we have improved quarterback play, we have a better chance and more opportunities for those targets to be bigger plays and to be caught as well. So I'm going to be honest. Like you said, I don't know why he can't be top 3. It feels pretty solidified that like Jamar Chase is going to be the top guy, but there's something to kind of nitpick for every single guy after Jamar Chase. Justin Jefferson, we've had this debate before, and he seems to be quarterback proof. You do have a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, he's a hard one to argue with, that's for sure.
Right. So like Justin Jefferson could have a Malik Nabers type of year,
Yeah.
or Malik Nabers rookie type of year where, like, yes, he's going to get fed the ball, but it may not be super great, might not score a ton because the rookie quarterback experiment isn't working out. And I know
Yeah.
JJ McCarthy's not a rookie. You get what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure.
So again, I don't know why Malik Nabers can't be top 3. Everything from last year showed that they're going to get him the ball because he is the best player on that offense.
Definitely. I mean, he could take a Jefferson type jump his sophomore season, right? 1,800 yards. Like that is not out the realm of possibilities. That's for sure there. Especially when you look at their depth chart, Ty, because it's Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Zach Pascal, Jalen Hyatt. There's no one there, right? There's no one in the wide receiver room to take away targets. Tight end position, there's no one either. It's just Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger. I'm not too worried. Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary, Cam Scattaboo, they're not cutting into his targets. I'm sorry. So Brian Dable's shown, he's shown with Neighbors. He showed with Stephon Diggs. I'm going to force feed whoever my top guy is the ball. And with improved quarterback play from last year, it's going to be really hard to see him take a step back this year for sure. We're going to talk about, we're going to go back from an easy one to a little more harder discussion, a little more projection in this with Rome Odunze, right? Because Malik Nabers, not a lot of projection. That's kind of, I think we're going to see a lot of the same. Rome Odunze, though, there's a lot of new for Rome this year. A lot of new. You bring in Ben Johnson, lose Keenan Allen, but you bring in Luther Burden. Going into his second season, he's currently going as a wide receiver 35 over on Underdog Fantasy. He's going at pick 64. Last season, we saw 54 receptions, 101 targets, 734 yards, only 3 touchdowns, and wide receiver 49. But I guess going into this season now, right? They added Colston Loveland as well. I got to add him as top 10 pick. How do you view the pecking order for these Chicago weapons? Does Rome, do you think, does he nudge out DJ Moore? Let's say not at the beginning of the year, because we kind of know what it's going to look like being here by year's end. So at the end of 2025, how do you think the pecking order for these Chicago wide or pass catchers is going to look?
I think it is going to be very similar to what we saw with Detroit, where it was Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Sam Laporta. And then it was kind of Tim Patrick and Khalif Raymond then kind of in the mix. Like there was a clear 3, and then it was kind of everyone else. I see that with the Bears. I see it's DJ Moore. I see it's Rome Odunze, and I see it's Colston Loveland by year's end. Like from start to finish, I will say that too. Ooh, okay. I don't think it's going to change a whole lot because I know a lot of people are going to get excited about the Luther Burden pick, right, as the guy in the slot for the Chicago offense. I feel like it's worth reminding people, though, if they didn't know already, Detroit didn't really use a whole lot of 3 wide receivers. They were bottom 10 in 3 wide receiver usage. So just because Amon-Ra played almost half of his snaps exactly from the slot doesn't mean that they had 3 wide receivers on the field at all times. So for Luther Burden, I think it's going to be pretty limited. And again, I think it does kind of fit into the long-term DJ Moore replacement. So that being said, back to Rome Odunze, I think Rome Odunze is going to be the guy that's going to be on the field the most alongside DJ Moore. And consequently, I think that there is a higher ceiling than what we saw with Jameson Williams, because not only is Rome Odunze the red zone threat, the much better red zone threat, Chicago just doesn't have a run game like Detroit does. They don't have a Jahmyr Gibbs. They don't have a David Montgomery. So the extra reliance on Caleb's arm until they do get a reliable enough run game makes me think that Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Colston Loveland are still going to get a ton of usage and can all be very, very good pieces for your fantasy team. And like you said, with Underdog, like Jordan Addison, Kenneth Walker, Travion, Kamara, Olave, Odunze, out of this range of players, Odunze is my favorite. Yeah. I know that there's upside for Kenneth. I know there's upside really for the other running backs. When I look at these receivers, I'm like, I think Rome Odunze has the best chance of finishing inside the top 20 compared to the other guys, because all the other guys are aging, have injury issues. I think there is plenty of upside. So I don't want to come across as like too bullish on Rome Odunze, but I don't think this offense, in terms of the pecking order, is as clouded or as competitive as people think. I think it is really straightforward that it is just these three guys.
Definitely. And you got to imagine Caleb Williams getting Ben Johnson, a second year in this system, a better offensive line, more weapons, is going to take a step forward. Right. I'm not expecting to see the same Caleb Williams we saw last season. So even if, let's say, because with Jaden Reed, Luther Burden, I feel like is going to play a similar role to what Jaden Reed plays for the Packers right now. That's kind of how I see him fitting in. And we saw the Packers jump up to, almost top 10 in 11 personnel last year, 67% of the time. But even if they're playing 67% of the time, with the amount that this team's probably going to throw with, not great running backs in the backfield, that's not enough to deter me from taking Rome Odunze at wide receiver 35. I mean, you're taking him pretty close to his floor. He was wide receiver 49 last year, and he played less snaps than Keenan Allen. So it's like, I understand Colson Loveland. Ben Johnson's going to like him a lot. He's going to use him a lot. DJ Moore is still there. He's probably still the one this season. But there's going to be enough to go around where if Odunze takes a skill step forward, like we project him to, if he steps into what we thought he was when he got drafted, we could see a pretty sizable jump in terms of fantasy for Rome Odunze at wide receiver 35. You might feel like maybe the best value out of all the guys we're going to talk about today. And that's where I agree with you. And it's hard not to sound like we're like pumping up Rome Odunze, but we are, because I haven't gotten to the Bears in my stat projections yet, but I already know he's going to be beaten wide receiver 30. I can guarantee it already.
I'll just add this about the Bears real quick. Like, this offense with Ben Johnson is the ultimate wild card. So again, this may sound like we're backtracking really, really quick on Rome Odunze, but you said it best. This is the best kind of value. This is the best bang for your buck when it comes to these year 2 wide receivers, because obviously we have our studs, right, with Nabers and the guy that we're going to talk about next, Brian Thomas Jr. But Marvin Harrison Jr., the cost is already saying, at least on Underdog and in best ball, that a leap is going to happen. For whatever reason, we're not so bullish then on Rome Odunze, when it almost feels like I feel more confident in the Rome Odunze utilization than I do about Marvin Harrison, but the cost went up for Marv. So again, it just, maybe it is confirming the biases that I have, but like I said, Rome Odunze, right, in terms of the top 3 guys that were taken in the draft from 2024, by far the best value.
For sure. And real quick, just give them a wide receiver position. They know our case. How high? What's the ceiling right now, Rome Odunze? Where, if you had to say this is the highest he'll finish, but I think he could finish here, where are you saying?
Probably no higher than 18.
18. Oh.
So like there is some. See, like top 15, I think top 15, we're pushing Rome Odunze above some guys that, again, can definitely, like,
for sure,
kind of ugly volume their way in there. But for Rome Odunze, like, we are jumping over guys that would be like DJ Moore, potentially his teammate. Could be like Rashee Rice, Zay Flowers, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, like all these guys that are much more household names and may or may not have done it. But again, I think Rome Odunze can kind of sneak into that top 20, and it's going to be the most quiet, like, top 20 season.
For sure. I see it similar to Devonta Smith his sophomore year, sneaking it. He was top 10. He was wide receiver 9. Right. I think Devonta Smith is a better wide receiver. I think Devonta Smith doesn't get his flowers enough. I think he's a better wide receiver. However, Rome's going to be in a better pass offense. Maybe not. Okay. I'm going to say that, and all Eagles fans are going to say, well, Jalen Hurts better. Okay. I'm just saying they're going to throw the ball more, right? The Eagles like to run the ball. Bears are going to throw the ball more. That's what I see to be similar with that. But you foreshadowed it, Ty. We're going to go to my guy. We're going to talk about Mr. Brian Thomas Jr. Just fantastic rookie year. I staked my entire offseason on Brian Thomas last year. And you know what? He was fantastic.
Duval.
We gotta thank our guy Liam Cohen for that. But last season, like I said, 87 receptions, 133 targets, 1,282 yards, and 10 touchdowns. The wide receiver 4. And yet he's going as the wide receiver 8. I'm just kidding. Yet. He's going as a wide receiver 8, 12th overall, still a first round pick. But I guess there's 2 big changes this season, right? We moved to Liam Cohen. The fellas are notoriously high on what we think Liam Cohen can do for this offense. However, we watched the Jags on draft night trade up to go get Travis Hunter. So you got both sides of the coin. Let's start with Travis Hunter because I think people are questioning that a little bit. Like, does Travis Hunter affect the ceiling of Brian Thomas at all? Does it make you worry about the Brian Thomas pick, or are you still feeling pretty confident even with Travis Hunter there?
I am so torn on Brian Thomas and what the impact of Travis Hunter is on him. And because I see this one of 2 ways, where it's not necessarily is he going to be major in offense and minor in defense, or major in defense and minor in offense. But I see this in one of 2 ways, where Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter can have very similar utilization in this offense, where they can get moved around the formation across the line of scrimmage. But I also see a way where, like, Brian Thomas Jr. kind of takes the Mike Evans role, and Travis Hunter then gets the Chris Godwin treatment. And that's not to say that Brian Thomas Jr. wouldn't be able to come through, because, like, the guy showed last year that, like, in a Mike Evans type role, he will succeed. But I do think in general, having Travis Hunter around does kind of cap the ceiling a little bit, because before we were talking about a guy that, in a similar conversation to Malik Nabers, that was like top 3, top 5 upside, because what we were seeing when he was the alpha, when he was the guy, he was unstoppable. 27.2% target share from weeks 9 to 18. And when that was without Christian Kirk, that was top 10 in that stretch. But because you have Travis Hunter, I don't know if we're going to get that kind of top 10 usage out of Brian Thomas. It could still be 15. It could still be top 20 at the very worst. But I struggle to see where he can be a top 5 guy. And that's not to say that he's going to be a bad pick at, like, the end of your first round, early second round. But if I'm going to be taking a guy, I kind of want some more upside. And I don't know if I'm too concerned. We might be taking him at a ceiling. Maybe, just maybe.
I'll be honest. I think you're too concerned. I think when you look at Tampa last year, they threw the ball 570 times. And you know, I love Travis Hunter. I think he's gonna be fantastic. But the rest of the depth chart on Jacksonville is not going to steal targets away from either of these guys. I'm just going to pull it. I had it and I lost it. Here it is. Jacksonville Jaguars depth chart. De'Ami Brown, their other wide receiver. Josh Cephas, Parker Washington, Austin Trammell. Right. I mean, these are not names that I'm concerned about getting targets. Brenton Strange is their starting tight end. Johnny Munt. We love Johnny Munt. You know, ex-Viking.
Best tight end 3 in the league.
Exactly. Like he's not a receiving tight end. Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, Bashal Tutin. I don't think they're going to combine for 300 targets this year. So I think even if Travis Hunter is getting his, Brian Thomas is too special of a talent to not get his. I think he can take a Malik Nabers-esque jump. Now, I think that's the difference with Brian Thomas versus Malik Nabers. Pretty much everyone is still bullish on Malik Nabers, but I do think there's a little more concern around Brian Thomas, the situation. Is he going to be truly elite compared to Malik Nabers? I think that's where they are. For me, I have them pretty much same tier. But I know for most people like you, Ty, they're a different tier for sure.
So I'm maybe the best way to say how I'm feeling is that I think Malik Nabers has a clearer path to being a top 3 guy. Brian Thomas Jr. still has a path to being a top 3, top 5 guy, but the chances of it in my mind are a little more slim than it would be for a Malik Nabers. That's probably the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we go to our next player, we're going to do one more player, then take a break. I haven't talked to the 89% of you who aren't subscribed to our channel yet. I know I waited 28 minutes into the episode before I decided to talk to you guys. That is on me. So please give us I'm just kidding. But seriously, we're coming out with content all year long. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. And stick around because we got year 3. I'm pretty sure wide receivers coming on Thursday. We got a ton of content coming up for you guys, 2 pods a week. So do not miss out on that. But the next player drafted in 2024 was Xavier Worthy, who we talked about Rome Ty. Xavier Worthy going 14 spots ahead of Rome Odunze. He is currently the wide receiver 14 wide receivers ahead of him. He is going almost 30 picks ahead of him. He's ADP of 38. Last season, 59 receptions, 98 targets, 638 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Was the wide receiver 33. So, Ty, the only question we can ask here is he the next Tyreek Hill? No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, we're not going to compare him to Tyreek Hill just because he's fast, even though that is exactly what the people want. But what the people really do want to know is Rashee Rice is coming back this year. Travis Kelce's getting older. What is Xavier's role going to be in this offense? Like, is he a downfield threat? Because he was barely over 10 yards per reception last year. Is he going to be a short yardage guy? But that was what Rashee Rice was. So what in the world are we to make of Xavier Worthy?
No, he's not the next Tyreek Hill. Just because you go fast does not mean you are fast like Tyreek Hill fast. 59.5% of his routes, according to reception perception, were downfield, right? So your go routes and your corners and your posts, or close to the line of scrimmage, screens, slants, and flats. There is nothing. I shouldn't say nothing, but when it's that lopsided to those 2 areas of the field, that tells me that your utilization is pretty limited, which forecasts to me there's going to be some inconsistencies, that you're going to have some really good games. Then some other games, it's not going to be so great. On top of that, like you said, we're getting Rashee Rice back into the fold. Obviously, he's coming off of his knee injury. So maybe there is a bit of a takeoff or a ramp up for Rashee Rice. But I'm just going to say wide receiver 21, I feel like we're pushing up the upside or the scenario that Xavier Worthy and Patrick Mahomes connect more often downfield. Yeah. Is that a possibility? Sure. And in some weird way, it's kind of a similar question to Marvin Harrison Jr. If you believe that they will connect more, if you believe that the offense changes for Marvin Harrison in that similar sense, then you're going to be in on Xavier Worthy as a wide receiver 21. I cannot just outright say, yeah, it's going to happen. So the wide receiver 21 price tag, at least on Best Ball and Underdog, worries me a little bit. And yes, you want to bet on the best offenses in the league. I don't know if Kansas City has really kind of delivered their value of being one of the top offenses when it comes to fantasy football, especially in best ball in recent memory.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a great point. It feels like, because Rashee Rice is wide receiver 17 right now in best ball. So it feels like we're projecting this whole Chiefs offense is all of a sudden going to jump back to what they were 3 years ago, which I don't think is a guarantee. Now, if they do, if Patrick Mahomes is throwing for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, yeah, Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice are probably both going to pay off on ADP. However, if they keep what they've been doing these last 2 years, I see him more to like a 2021 T. Higgins, where Rashee Rice is not, I'm not saying he's Jamar Chase because I don't think he has that upside, but I think he's the more consistent player you're going to look at Whereas Xavier Worthy might get you 25, 20, 18, but then he might also get you 4, 5, 6, 3 weeks in a row. Because is it an Xavier Worthy game? Especially when you say like, how you were saying, Ty, it's either he gets multiple plays drawn up for him each game, or he connects on a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're playing that type of game, Jamison Williams last year, great example of this. When Jamison Williams hit the big one, it was an awesome week. When he didn't, you were kind of like, well, that kind of stunk. Now, does he have more upside? Obviously. I think there's, in a Chiefs offense, Patrick Mahomes, the speed he has, he's got top 15 upside. It's just, are we going to see it consistently enough where you're happy that you took him this high?
Mm-hmm. And I just struggle to see it. There's nothing wrong with the upside plays, but just for reference, on the Fantasy Pros ECR tool, the wide receiver 29. I'm much more a fan of that than I am nearly top 20, pushing him into the range of guys where, I mean, it's a early fourth, late third. That's pretty steep, if you ask me.
For sure. And I will say, I do think it kind of is the range of wide receivers right there is so wide open that it does feel like that tier goes all the way down to Rome Odunze of guys from Xavier Worthy to Rome. It's just, that's why we like the guy at the end of the tier, because you're getting him a full 3 rounds later, so that's kind of where that comes into play for us. But we're going to take a quick break and hear from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
And we are back. And we're going to change gears a little bit here for these next 3. Our fourth guy, I'll give you a hint, is Lad McConkey. He's going to be a little more similar conversation to the guys we talked about. But these next 3 is going to be a lot more projecting outcomes, because we just didn't see them on the field as much. We didn't see the production quite as much, whatever it was. But we're starting with Ricky Persall, who goes as the wide receiver 43, 77th pick, which would give him a 7th round grade, or not grade, 7th round ADP in best ball right now. And Ty, last year, 31 receptions, 46 targets, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns with wide receiver 81, played 11 games because, he got shot naturally. And which I got to say, coming back from that in a season, still playing, got to give him his props where it's due. Obviously, no more Deebo Samuel, but you still have an offense with George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, even Juwan Jennings, who popped off a little last year. So where does he kind of slot in here? He's going the highest, or no, he's going second. I think Juwan Jennings is going higher than him.
Correct.
But he's going second highest out of the wide receivers, ahead of Brandon Ayuk, who, because of the injury, is dropping a little bit lower. Do you think that's accurate for how this is going to play out this year? Do you think he's the upside shot? How do you view Ricky Persall?
Ricky's an interesting one, because I feel like he's the barometer of how the San Francisco offense is going to move into the future without Deebo Samuel, where Ayuk has really been known as the outside guy. Juwan Jennings is a bigger body, so you think he's more outside, but he can play in the slot a little more. That kind of leaves Ricky as the main slot guy. And last year, I know that there were a bunch of injuries with this San Francisco team. You didn't have Christian McCaffrey, so you weren't really at full strength. And then you also lost Brandon Ayuk. But being bottom 5 and 3 wide receiver set usage, isn't really a great sign. So that's why, again, I say he's kind of the barometer for how San Francisco is going to adapt their offense. Are they going to get Ricky on the field more often? Because if they do, that means more 3 wide receiver sets. I I'll be completely honest. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way that they go, just to give lighter boxes for Christian McCaffrey. You try to spread out defenses a little bit. And obviously, like, defenses have to respect the weapons that you're going to try to spread them out with, right? But there's something to each of those guys on that San Francisco, starting three, I'll call them, with Ricky and Ayuk and Jennings. The defenses have to respect. And I think Ricky Persall, to me, just a little bit of rookie evaluation here. Dude just is an elite route runner, and he can separate, and that'll play. So in some ways, I think he is slightly undervalued. I'm not going to say that Jauan Jennings is overvalued, but for where each of these San Francisco receivers go, at least in best ball right now, I'm a really big fan of, because again, I think there is a clearer path compared to, again, the situations that we talked about with like Xavier Worthy and Marvin Harrison Jr., where there's question marks there. The question marks for me when it comes to the San Francisco offense seem pretty clearer for me to buy in on. And maybe it is a kind of a cost thing, because Ricky is going at least 20 spots later than the guys that we've expressed question marks on before. So Ricky's an interesting one, and he's going to be kind of at least my barometer for how the general feels about that San Francisco passing attack.
For sure. And Lucas talks about it all the time, especially in best ball, attack ambiguity. And that's exactly what you would do with this offense here. Of all three of these wide receivers are going late. We've seen that Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan can produce top 20 wide receivers with, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. So it's, if Ricky Persall is going to take that step forward, if that's what you're believing in, then there's no reason he couldn't be a top 20 wide receiver. There's no reason he couldn't be the wide receiver one on this offense, with Brandon Ayuk coming back from injury, Jauan Jennings being kind of a late bloomer of, it's still, jury's still out a little bit. Was he just in the right place at the right time to when those injuries happened, or was he, kind of breaking out of his own? And so that's the question marks. I'm a little more hesitant on Ricky. I do understand, like you said, I see the path for upside, and I understand this, where you're at. I just think, I don't know if he's going to be good enough to not be the fourth best option on this team behind Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, and Ayuk. So that's my only concern. But I do understand what you're saying, where his path to upside is pretty clear. If he's the best wide receiver, he's going to be he's going to play. So, and he's got, two guys who are a little more questionable right next to him. The next guy we're going to talk about, Ty, I don't really know what to do here with Xavier Legette, Spaghetti, because they just took Tet 8th overall. And Ty, you were saying before our live draft, you're like, Panthers can't take Tet here. It doesn't make sense to have two first-round wide receivers, because if they're both good, you're going to be paying them back-to-back, and you're going to have a Jamar Chase T. Higgins situation. And yet they did it. So does that mean they still believe in Legette? And they're saying, hey, we're going to have these guys both on each side? Or is this the nail in the coffin and get out while you can on Xavier Legette?
In some weird way, kind of sitting on him more, letting him marinate a little bit more. It actually makes a ton of sense that Carolina went with Tet McMillan, because I think it actually kind of aligns that receiver room a lot better with where they are best utilized. Like, you've got Adam Thielen. Yes, he was in the slot majority of his time last year, but you're going to keep him in the slot now at this point. Tet McMillan is your X. He's going to be the he's going to be the do it all guy. That's what he was at Arizona. That's what he's going to do at Carolina. That kind of puts Legette on the other side of the field. And in some weird way, I'm not going to say that like Xavier Legette has top 36 upside or even top 40 at that extent. But for the wide receiver 68, and maybe the simplest way to say it is attention off of Legette that's on Tet McMillan will help him out. But I just think, again, Legette isn't going to be asked to do as much as he was probably asked to do his rookie year. And that may be to his benefit. That may actually help him out a little bit. So, again, you kind of let it off with what my argument was during the draft of like, well, if you've got two first-round receivers, you're going to have to pay them. I think the best way that I can revise that statement now is that we know what the ceiling and the floor is for Legette is that he's going to be a really his ceiling is a really solid number 2. His floor is that kind of rotation number 3 guy. And yeah, like maybe a little bit of a misuse of first round capital. But I'm probably just going to ignore the capital at this point and just say there's no way that Xavier Legette has a worse year than he did his rookie year, because I just think it's a better situation. The offensive floor is higher now with Dave Canales in year 2, Bryce Young playing as well as he did at the end of the year, and you've got now a Ted McMillan in your offense.
Yeah. No, and I do think the draft capital helps to the fact of they're not just going to bury him on the depth chart. First of all, they didn't bring enough wide receivers to bury him on the depth chart, but it's at least giving him another shot to start this season. So if Xavier Legette, like you said, is going to prove to be a solid number 2, and I don't know about you. I'm expecting this Carolina offense to take another step forward, especially the way they played at the end of last season. We could, like you said, wide receiver 68. It's not that hard to outperform that at all. Like the fact he's going behind Cedric Tillman is insane. I mean, they don't even have a quarterback in Cleveland. So if you had to give me a percentage chance that he finishes as a top 30 wide receiver and a percentage chance that he finishes outside the top 50, what would you put those 2% at?
Finishing inside the top 30, I'm going to give it like 10% on a good day. Like, I just don't see that happening. But finishing outside of the top 50, that is, to me, like less than that, 5%.
Okay.
Like,
so you're pretty
think,
solid in that range of 30 to 50.
Like, Legette should be rostered. Legette is going to be a nice wide receiver 5, kind of bench stash piece. Because, again, I think the floor is better for this Carolina offense. And you're going to have, again, to just simplify it, the extra attention that Ted McMillan's going to draw is going to open things up for Legette.
No, for sure. And, he's a guy who he kind of, didn't like have a great game last year. So I think that's why he's going, right? Because when you think of rookies going into sophomore year, if they had one really good game, we kind of hold on to that. Oh, this is the upside. Legette didn't really have that. And so I think that might be part of why he's going where he's going. The next guy, kind of similar to Legette, Keon Coleman, going a little bit ahead of him, right? Wide receiver 55, pick 112, 29 receptions, 59 targets, 556 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Last year was wide receiver 68. He only played 13 games, did miss 4 weeks, weeks 10 through 14 with a wrist injury. Obviously, Coleman drafted similar, spot to Xavier Legette. I think first pick of the second round. Is that what he was? First or second
First pick, second round. Yep.
First pick of the second round. So, Buffalo knew what they wanted there. And I guess the question is then, can he become the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo? Can he become Josh Allen's guy this year? Because that's really what his fantasy hinges on. Because if he can't beat out, Elijah Moore, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, he's not really worth a look, right? I mean, that's just, you're just not going to be fantasy relevant if you can't do that. So do you think that we're going to see a jump from Keon Coleman, who admittedly is a more raw prospect, right? Came over from playing, he's a basketball player at Michigan State. He's playing, transition full-time football at Florida State. So do you think he can be the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo, Ty?
It's hard to say, because I see it from 2 different lenses, where this Buffalo offense is not built on a number 1 guy. And I'm not going to say it's like the Green Bay offense where you've got like 5 wide receiver 1s, but they just spread the ball out. And last year, the guy that stepped up the most was Khalil Shakir. Could that happen again? Totally. Why can't it? Because they just spread the ball around. I just think the path, when you look at just player and development, maybe I'll mix in some situation again here. This is just, I don't see it as clear as maybe some other people would. I know that there are people that are going to say like wide receiver 55 for the price tag and the upside. Absolutely. Why not? I was one of those people for a little while. But the more I look at it, I'm just like, I don't think the team just went out and signed Josh Palmer because they felt like it. That's just another mouth to feed in this offense. Yeah. Like you said, with Khalil Shakir, you still have Curtis Samuel, which Mr. Manufactured Touch guy, and Elijah Moore. So like you've got 5 receivers that I just see very similarly in the sense that like I don't see one of them just winning out over everyone else. And then, like you said, you've got a Dalton Kincaid that's still in this offense, and Josh Allen, James Cook, and maybe some more Ray Davis in this backfield now. I just don't really I think the price tag for Keon Coleman is fine, but I'm also not going to be surprised if he finishes around this range, if not worse, like it was last year, just because we need to see some more development, and it's going to still take another year for him to get going.
So I'm not saying this just because Josh Palmer's on the team, but could we see similar to a Quentin Johnston type season? Quentin Johnston, wide receiver 36 last year, extremely inconsistent. Scored some touchdowns, right? A bigger body guy, obviously with Justin Herbert, but multiple games under 5 fantasy points, multiple games under 3 fantasy points, but then had a couple games where he scored, and you're like, oh, if I could have thrown him in my lineup there. Do you think that's a similar range of outcomes for Keon Coleman? Because that's kind of where I'm seeing him this year. I don't know if he takes a true step forward. I'm not giving up on Keon Coleman, but I just don't think all of a sudden we're going to see he's a legit wide receiver, wide receiver 1, right? Playing on the outside that Josh Allen trusts on down-to-down basis.
I think the best way to say it is if you think this is going to be the Keon Coleman breakout year, the odds are you're going to be a little wrong. You're going to be a little early, actually. Yeah. But I also kind of agree with you in the sense that, like, for price tag sake, it's not the worst. And whether you like to admit it or not, there is a path at least that he can best that. So I think it's not going to be for everyone. And at least like in best ball, for me, I might like him more in best ball than in redraft, just because there's some team building strategy that goes into best ball drafts. So that's probably where I'm going to land with Keon Coleman. But I think like if you get into dynasty, like Keon Coleman is a really nice, like buy low target, just because again, we're still early enough. Consensus maybe still down on him because the rookie year wasn't as good as we thought it could be. So I don't completely disagree with you. It may not just be my type of flavor just going into a redraft year.
For sure. And that makes sense. So the last question I have on Keon Coleman, you're staring down your draft. You have 2 options. You can go Keon Coleman or Xavier Legette. Who are you going?
I'm probably going to go Legette.
Really?
Which
All
is
right, I'm
wild.
Coleman, so that's interesting. Just what you laid out of being the wide receiver 2, having more of a defined role. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Defined role, and maybe just, I don't want to say I like the Carolina offense more for fantasy than Buffalo, but like I'm so worried by an offense that just does not want to give a guy like one single guy the ball. Yeah. And that they would rather just spread it out over 7 different players versus Carolina, where you're like, actually, there is kind of a clear pecking order there.
For sure. All right. This next guy, we have him, and then we're going to do 2 honorable mentions at the end, Ty, and I each picked a player that we want to talk about quick. And I know some of you have been waiting for Ladd McConkey ever since, we talked about Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas at the top of the show, but you got to remember, these 8 wide receivers were all picked ahead of Ladd McConkey. So if you're a Chargers fan, you can rejoice a little bit. You can be a little happy, but he's currently going as a wide receiver 11, Ty. And last week you kind of, I don't want to say told us your displeasure with how high he's being ranked right now, but you had some concerns with the way that we are ranking Ladd McConkey. He's 18th overall, so he's middle of the 2nd round. Last year, great season, 82 receptions, 112 targets, 1,149 yards, 7 touchdowns, wide receiver 12, a fantastic playoff game. Are we drafting him at a ceiling? Are we? Because that's where, like, we talked about that with Brian, even Brian Thomas. We talked about that with Marvin Harrison up at the top. It's just what is truly the season or ceiling here for Ladd McConkey?
There is a part of me that does think that we're taking him at his ceiling. And that's not to say that, like, I think he's a bad pick or that he's a overrated player or anything like that. Like, I think wide receiver 11 over on Best Ball is fair. And I get why you would take a guy that high. My concerns just with a more structured offense, I'll call it, right? You added the more vertical outside threat with Trey Harris. You added a much more dynamic, or your run game is going to be more dynamic, I should say, because you added better talent, because you went from J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards to Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton. So there is a part of me that says, like, well, are we going to see nearly the same opportunities that this guy saw? But when you look at it, just 112 targets on the year. So it wasn't like he was getting force fed or anything like that. And the other part of this too is that even if this Chargers offense runs the ball more, I don't think I'm necessarily seeing that the piece of the pie that is Ladd McConkey's in this passing game changes too drastically, right? Obviously, if passing attempts go down, then there's a chance that you're going to see targets go down in general. But I'm not exactly sure that it's going to be like Ladd McConkey that's going to be on the wrong end of that. So I think maybe I'm a little more relaxed on what I had said in the past about Ladd McConkey's ADP. I still think that there is a bit of a ceiling that we are kind of picking at right now. But at the same time, like I said at the top, I'm not saying that it's a bad pick, and I'm not saying that it's that he's a bad player by any means. It may not just be what I want to target in the second round, unless like I go upside in the first round and then I need a guy that can just give me good points week in, week out, and that would be a Ladd McConkey. So I think the best way to say it, I don't know if he should be a fit for every team drafting, because if I want an early second round receiver, I'm still hoping that they're going to be kind of an alpha target getter in their offense, and Ladd McConkey's not that, but still a very, very good player. Don't hear what I'm not saying.
For sure. Yeah, he was 6th in slot snaps last year. He was 66th in ADOT. He was 7th in yards per route run, but 29th in yards per reception. So, right, it's just, he had a very defined role. And I think we're going to see that this year. It's just how many targets are they going to be able to get him? That's what it comes down to. If he's going to be a 160 target guy, he can be a top 7 wide receiver. But he needs the volume for the way that he plays, right? Because he's a close to the line of scrimmage kind of guy. He's essentially last year was who Justin Herbert would dump the ball off to, because he wasn't, truly using those running backs. So he was the safety blanket for them. But like you said, he is going to be a safety guy because he is a guy who's going to be guaranteed volume. It's just, are we going to see that top 10 volume that you would need to put him, close to the numbers that people are really hoping that he's going to be at? And finally, we are going to do 2 honorable mentions. Each of us picked a player, give you a minute on the outlook of that player. Maybe if there is a little bit of hidden upsides to tie. Who did you go with?
I went with Jalen McMillan. A very, I don't want to call him a fan favorite from last year, but there were some good games with Jalen McMillan when Chris Godwin and Mike Evans were out. And I think with consensus being still as in on him as they are, I still just think we need to kind of slow the roll even more. Taking Emeka Egbuka in the first round signals to me that Jalen McMillan is going to be the 4th guy when all these wide receivers are healthy. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Egbuka, then Jalen McMillan. And I don't know exactly how often we're going to get 3 wide receivers on the field with this Tampa team. I've said before, if Emeka Egbuka makes a strong enough impression while Chris Godwin is still recovering from his injury, if he's not ready by the beginning of the year, there's a chance that we're going to see Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Emeka Egbuka on the field more than usual, more often. but that still leaves Jalen McMillan as the outsider looking in on it. So I don't want to say that Jalen McMillan is like a handcuff receiver, but that's what I think of Jalen McMillan, is that he is kind of the, I think you're best off not taking him in a draft. I think you're best off kind of saving him, letting him just go to waivers, but keeping him on your watch list, because if something were to happen to Mike Evans, something were to happen to Chris Godwin, then it's going to be Jalen McMillan whose name is going to be called upon, and then he may give you some top 40 results on a week-to-week basis. But for the long-term and season outlook of Jalen McMillan, I mean, according to Fantasy Pros ECR, he goes ahead of Keon Coleman, ahead of Matthew Golden, ahead of, and again, like, these expert consensus rankings are for redrafts, so they're not exactly final by any means. These are still very early, but it still doesn't sit right with me that he's still going ahead of some of those guys.
Yeah, no, you just feel like you really have no path the upside. The guy I'm going to go with is AD Mitchell. He's a guy we know, our dear pal Lucas, who isn't with us today. Loved last year, and it just didn't quite work out in the rookie season. Whether it was because quarterback play, wasn't able to see the field. He still is the wide receiver 4 on their depth chart, behind Alec Pierce, behind Josh Downs, behind Michael Pittman. So maybe it's a year early for AD Mitchell. Maybe, quarterback play isn't enough between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. However, this dude's an athlete. 4.3 speed, right? He had I think 39.5-inch vertical, 11 foot 4-inch broad jump. So he can move. It's just, is he going to be able to see the field? Are we going to be able to see him connect with Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson? There was quite a few times last year where he did look open and he was just missed downfield. So it'll be interesting. He obviously is going to have to be the wide receiver 3 on this team. He's going to have to beat Alec Pierce because they do very similar things. Pierce and Michael Pittman going into the last year of their contract. So similar to Jalen McMillan, it's not ideal as of right now, but unlike McMillan, I do think Mitchell has a path, at least more clear path to playing time, to actually seeing the field with the guys ahead of him. But yeah, that wraps up our second-year wide receivers. We got third-year wide receivers coming for you on Thursday, and Lucas will be back for that one. So we got the dream team all ready to go there. Thanks again for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications as well, because like I said, we got another one coming this week, 2 more the week after, all the way till the season starts, and then I think we ramp it up to 3. So do not miss out, and we will see you on Thursday. Deuces.